You're listening to Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp. Karate kick, baby. Rock and roll. Hey, what do you think about the new theme song? It's kind of a bummer that I can't play music on my podcast anymore. And I want to thank, I got 4 or 5 people sent songs emailed me songs that I could potentially use as my new theme song. So I want to thank Udo Schank in Montana, guys from Germany. Met him when I was in Montana. Sent that one in. Josh sent some good ones. I'm probably going to play some different intros over the next couple of episodes, and we will eventually find out what song works best. But I really appreciate everybody that sent in music and made music for my humble, happy little podcast. So happy September 11th. Maybe we're not supposed to say that. It is September 11th, 2018. I apologize for not putting out a podcast in the last couple of weeks. I was just dog tired when I got back from China, and I only had a few days home with Ashna before I had to go to New York. So the theme of this episode is when is enough enough? Because after Mongolia, which was the last episode of the podcast, I went to Beijing. And there was one thing I wanted to do in Beijing, and that was go to the Great Wall of China so that I could take a ride down the Great Slide at the Great Wall. If you've never seen it, I have this YouTube video. The second time I went there, I filmed the whole ride. It's like an 8 or 10 minute journey going down this slide, and it's just it's amazing. It's China. There's no safety. There's no railing. There's no helmet. If you fly off of a corner and plummet hundreds of feet to your rocky death, that's just the way shit goes. But it's exciting. I love the slide at the Great Wall of China, and this was the 3rd time in my life that I've been there. So the Great Wall of China is like a bucket list thing for people to do in their lifetime, and I've been there 3 times now. And there's some big questions in my life, things. It just, I don't know, it's just kind of the theme of where I'm at in my life and in the world and the United States right now. Like, when is enough enough? How many times does somebody have to go to the Great Wall of China in their lifetime? I mean, I even say it in the intro to the podcast. I might take you to the Great Wall of China. Well, how many times can I take you there? I filmed little clips this time for my Instagram. I've pretty much broken free of all of my internet addictions except for Instagram, and I'm probably gonna break that habit soon. But I remember when I lived in Amsterdam, some visiting friends sometimes would ask me, when is enough? When, as far as getting high and partying. And I remember being asked this question when I lived in Amsterdam, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm not even close to scratching that surface. So at the age of 47, I blacked out and busted my head open, and I have not drank alcohol or done hard drugs since then. So I guess that was kind of where I found my limit. And the only thing I'll do anymore is I'll smoke a little weed. And let me just let's take a little quick detour right now. I'm speaking to you in Chicago. It's 75 degrees out. It's probably the last beautiful day of the year here. I've got Cubs tickets. I'm going to go see the Cubs at Wrigley Field later. And but let's just take a quick little detour. When is enough on the weed? Because it really warms my heart. Like, there was a group of 6 women at the show here at Zany's in Chicago the other night, and they came up to me and they were like, at the end of my show, I tell the stories about busting my head open and having my goldfish taken away in Hong Kong. And these women went, "Oh my God, we knew we liked you, but then at the end when you said you were sober, then we fell in love with you, and we're all here and we're all sober." And I've had people come up and tell me things like that. So the last, other than nicotine lozenges, which I'm addicted to since I quit smoking cigarettes, smoking marijuana once in a while is pretty much the last, I don't know, what do you call it, a habit? Anyway, the kind of marijuana that I fell in love with years ago does not exist anymore. We used to call it Mexican ragweed. Hopefully no Mexican people would be offended by that. I consider that the highest form of praise because that was the happiest kind of light weed that you could roll into a joint and smoke and have intelligent conversations with. It's funny, my wife Ashna, she gets high on intelligent conversation. And a lot of European friends that I know, they get high on intelligent conversation. So that's what I'm striving for. I want my highs to be from intelligence and having great conversations with friends that I love. So, like when I lived in Amsterdam, you can't find, low grade kind of easy pot. And now that marijuana is legal in California, I've only bought it a couple times on Melrose, and indica is the head cruncher shit, and sativa is the kind of the light, happier weed. So I always ask for sativa, and Ashna tried it, and she hated it. I was kind of excited. Wow, she's finally going to try it. She's been giving me a hard time over this since we met, and I was thinking, wow, she's going to be a convert, but it made her even more anti-weed. Not that she's anti-weed, she just, it's just counterproductive. I mean, what's his name? Elon Musk was just on Joe Rogan's podcast a few days ago and smoked pot, and he said that, it's counterproductive, and that was an interesting clip, and the stock of Tesla plummeted after this guy is getting baked. I mean, if you want to do important things in life, like have a television show, run an automobile electric car maker, the money purses don't want you high all the time. So basically, where this story is leading is, I think I'm getting to the end of my marijuana career, which is interesting because now it's becoming legal everywhere in the United States. But I don't find much pleasure in it anymore because that happy rag Mexican weed does not exist. The sativas I tried from Melrose were too debilitating. So there's this new place I had heard about on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's called MedMen. I actually thought it was called MadMen, like the television show. So I go into this place, MedMen, on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it was like the Apple store of marijuana. There were all these people in the same colored T-shirts on the main floor, and they kind of had it set up. I'm sure that was the designer's intention, to make it kind of look like the Apple store of weed, where you talk to several people before you get back to the important desk where decisions and things are made, and purchases and whatnot. And it's always funny about the Apple store is they always have like 20 or 30 people in the main area of the store when you walk in, and they're all completely useless. They don't know anything. They can't. They always send you to the back of the store. So I think they should do a big coordinated dance every hour on the hour at at the Apple store. So the weed store, I talked to this guy, and he was from England. He was British. He's from Bristol, and I told him I was a comedian, and I told him I said look, man, I was going to some places on Melrose, and I'm asking for sativas, and I just can't find that light, happy weed, and my wife doesn't smoke it, and I wanted to show her what was good about this flower that everyone raves about. And so he was a big fan of comedy podcasts. The guy's name is Connor, and he said, look, man, everybody's against indica, and that's the wrong news, and you should smoke this, a hybrid that's between indica and sativa. And I tried it, and it was even worse than any of the shit that I've smoked before. Sorry, Connor, from Bristol, England, the suicide capital of Europe per capita. I told him that. He didn't know that. Interesting fact about Bristol. Anyway, I'm going to strive to be 100% sober in the near future. Anyway, MedMen was a nice design, but I'm not convinced about the indica. And what was my point of it all? Yeah, I think I've had enough. And I love China. I love. I'm glad I went to the Great Wall of China and I got to ride that slide again. I think Donald Trump would probably have an easier time selling his border wall if he put a prototype of that great slide that's at the Great Wall of China. If there was a big slide on his wall, maybe he would have a easier time selling it. Of course, I'm kidding. Donald Trump is a douche. And, I'm in an interesting place in my life right now because I'm having all this international travel. I'm overly booked right now, and it's putting a strain on my relationship. Ashna has been my best friend, my partner in every aspect of life, and I can feel her growing away from me. She's got this group of Dutch female friends that she's hanging out with now, and she's got a best friend, and she doesn't want to travel with me as much. And she's really loving Los Angeles. And also, she wants to make a name for herself. She's tired of living in my shadow. And that's one of the reasons that I fell in love with her, was that she was an independent, artistic human being. So I can't fault her for wanting to do that. I've been doing the international circuits for 20 years now. I'm 51 years old. It's like I've been trying to make this television show where I'm the Anthony Bourdain of comedy and highlighting comedy around the world, and it just seems like that's my white whale, Captain Ahab in Moby Dick. He had this obsession with this whale, and we all have obsessions in our life that we chase, and I'm starting to think that international comedy show is my white whale. Netflix Netflix is turning stand-up comedy into Evening at the Improv. The way Evening at the Improv helped kill stand-up comedy in the late 80s, that's what I think Netflix is doing. And hey, I'm bitter, sure. They said no to my special, and they said no to my idea of making an international comedy show, travel show. But, they're releasing all these short 15-minute specials, and then they're doing all these half-hour specials with comedians all around the world. So I think the international comedy has been covered. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but in case you don't know, my next live album is going to be, each track is me in a different city around the world. I've been recording all of my international shows outside of the United States for the last 2 years, and each track is going to be a 3 to 5 minute clip of jokes or stories about those places. And I've already got most of Europe, Asia, Sydney, Vancouver. I'm going back to Europe in October, and then Israel in December, and then I'm supposed to do Sao Paulo and Buenos Aires end of January, beginning of February, and then I will have. I've already started working with an editor doing the tracks. I'm going to have my international comedy album. So, what's going to be the point? I think I'm going to dial back the international travel next year and spend more time focused on Los Angeles and the United States and just making my next special. Here's a nice piece of news. I hope I don't lose the track where my brain was going. Ashna helped me with this. Sirius XM comedy. The good news is that I can put out albums, whenever I want. And that was my dream when I started, and to make our specials. Sirius XM has 5 comedy channels, and 3 of them, I think, are very clean comedy. It's all squeaky clean comedy. So I never had any desire to make clean comedy. That wasn't my... I just thought make funny comedy. And all my heroes, Pryor, Bill Hicks, Kinnison, everyone you want to throw in there, Dave Attell, Dave Chappelle, Hedberg, everyone I ever admired and looked up to. Well, Hedberg was clean, and Brian Regan, who I also adore, but it wasn't my intention ever to put out clean albums. But SiriusXM said that they needed clean comedy more than anything else. So Ashna and I took this project. I made this writing project over a 3-month period. And when I was in La Jolla at the Comedy Store last month, the month before, whenever it was, I recorded clean material in between the hunks of the regular set that I've been doing. So I put out a clean 18-minute album, and I called it Clean 18 because it's 18 minutes. And it was pretty, it was fun and it was easy, and some different jokes that gems from the notebook, some thoughts that I had years ago, but also stuff that I just wrote in the 3 months leading up to doing it. So I got an email from the man who runs the comedy at SiriusXM on Monday, and on Friday, Eastern Time, 7 p.m., on the Laugh USA network, that's the Clean Family Network, they are going to run my album in its entirety. And then the tracks are going to be played in heavy rotation. So, hey, what do you know? I'm a clean comedian now. I'm going to try and shoot for doing another clean album when I'm in Israel in December, because you have to be squeaky clean when you do the Israel gigs. It's funny, they said you have to be squeaky clean, but you can make all of the Muslim jokes you want. So that will be an interesting... Boy, wouldn't that have been an interesting episode for your travel show? Yeah, of course it would have been. But anywho, the trick in life is not to get bitter and stay happy. And I'm a very happy man. So it's interesting. When I came back from China, I had to go straight to West Nyack, New York, which I didn't even know where it was. It's like an hour outside of New York City in the Hudson Valley. And I had the Saturday off because Tracy Morgan was doing a special one night. And I took the bus from Orangeburg. My hotel was in Orangeburg. It cost $20 round trip. I couldn't believe how cheap it was. And I got to spend the day in New York City. And I went by the Comedy Cellar and talked to Esty. Speaking of Israel, that's why it reminded me, because Esty's from Tel Aviv, baby. And I was telling her honestly about Ashna and our situation. And I told her Ashna doesn't want to have kids. And Esty said, tell Ashna I applaud her decision. Children will ruin your life. And she was just saying about, how expensive it is. And her son is now divorced. And his wife is holding their kids over his head. And all this nasty, evil shit that people do when a marriage doesn't work out. So that was interesting. And I also talked to Bert Haas, who books Zanies. He took me, I always go to dinner with him. And he was telling me, you should protect your relationship and be on the road less. And I'm like, well, kind of locked in for riding out the rest of this year. So anyway, that's the situation of little Tommy Rhodes. I don't mean to bum everybody out. It's September 11th. It's absolutely stunning and beautiful today. It's too bad I really enjoyed playing songs on the podcast. So songs like Black Gold of the Sun by the Nuyorican Soul. I think you're going to have to start finding on your own. That was one of my summer jams. I am the black gold of the sun. So I'm in the Zanies condo. Tomorrow I get moved out to Rosemont. That's the club in the suburbs. And, when is enough? The traveling, and I'm never going to stop being a comedian. Zanies in Chicago. I have been playing this club for over 30 years now. John Fox originally brought me here when I was a young comedian, and I emceed here for 10 years. I featured for 10 years. And this was the fourth comedy club to open in the United States. The first comedy club in the United States was the Ice House in Pasadena, opened in 1964. And then the second comedy club was the Improv. Bud Friedman opened in New York City. I think that was like 67, 68. I'll have to read Cliff Nesterhoff's Comedians again. And then the third comedy club in America was the Comedy Store in Hollywood. And then the fourth, and that opened in 72. And then the fourth comedy club to open in the United States was Zanies in Chicago. And this place, it feels like it's being in the womb. It's swimming around in placenta for me. It's the old Shotgun Shack style room. The entrance is by the stage, just like when I was a kid and my dad brought me to the club in Washington, D.C., and the comedian pulled me on stage. I'll never get enough of doing stand-up comedy. There's certain things. Like I was saying, I think I've reached my limit on smoking weed. I think I've reached my limit on traveling internationally. I mean, where is left to go? I was thinking about it. Somebody tweeted to me, where have you gone? Where have you not been that you would like to go? The countries that I would still like to perform in that I've never been, India, Iceland, Morocco, Kenya, and South Africa. So basically that's the 5 countries that I have left that I would very much like to go to. Oh, and Brazil. Never been to Brazil. Okay, so that's 6. Takes a sip of cold water. Yeah. So I'll never get enough of performing at Zanies in Chicago. And Jesus Christ, I would like to get more famous and sell hard tickets so that I can repay some of these places. Like the clubs that have meant the most to me in my career, that have never wavered in their support. The Atlanta Punchline, Chicago, Zanies in Chicago, San Francisco Punchline, and Acme in Minneapolis. And the Comedy Cellar in New York City also. So, yeah, man. So here's the story, basically. So, and Barb, the owner, Jesus Christ. I talked to her about my situation with Ashna, and I said Ashna doesn't want to live in my shadow anymore, and she goes, "Oh, I know the feeling. I lived in Rick's shadow for years, forever." And Rick was her husband who started Zanies in 1978. And anyway, I love Zanies. I will play here forever, and it's a tiny room. It holds like 150 max, and I really I would love to repay all of these clubs in the future by doing sold out shows for them to repay them for all the love that they've given me through the years. Okay, I'm rambling. I was distracted by a text. I should have turned it off. But here's the story. On the last night, Sunday, it's a small show, and there's a guy sitting in the front row, and I thought, yeah, that guy looks familiar. And I'm on stage. I think there was 30 people in the audience. And that's why I brought up the thing about I'd like to repay these people. Like, it kills me like that there's only 30 people in the audience because whatever. I want people to benefit when Tom Rhodes is playing their room. So anyway, the show was phenomenal. I gave it my all. And there's only 30 people in the audience. And this guy in the audience, I thought, fuck, I thought he looked like somebody who was famous. And then I thought, nah, that can't be him. And then I asked if there was anybody from another country in the audience, my favorite part of the show. And the woman that was with him said, I'm from Argentina. And I said, you're shitting me. You're not going to believe this. My mother is from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And she was from Buenos Aires. And so I go into all my stories about Argentina. And I was more focused on the woman because she was from Argentina. And then I asked the guy, I said, where are you from? And he said, Vail, Colorado. And I thought, oh, well, that's a lovely place. I've only been to Aspen. I have nothing to say about Vail. And anyway, to make a short story longer, the next day, on Monday, yesterday, Jim Brewer sent me a text and said, hey, man, James Hatfield was at your show last night, and he loved it. Holy fuck. It was the lead singer of Metallica sitting in the front row of my show for 30 people, and I thought, that's just a guy that looks like James Hatfield. And then I always think it's stupid when people go, you know who you look like? You look like James Hatfield from, because I always hate when people do that to me, and a woman did it to me at the show on Friday. She said, because Burt Reynolds just died, this woman goes, you look like Burt Reynolds. Has anybody ever told you that? And I said, yeah, you're the third or fourth person who's told me that, and each time it felt like a dagger in my chest. Who wants to look like Burt Reynolds? And unfortunately, I think some people think I look like Burt Reynolds. I guess it's the big wrinkle cracks in my forehead. But anywho, it was cool to see James Hatfield laughing, looking back on it at my show. His wife is from Argentina, I just found out. And Jim Brewer is touring with them right now. And tonight they are performing in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I looked it all up. So, yeah. Anywho, Burt Reynolds is dead. WW and the Dixie Dance Kings was his best film. Jackie Gleason, who was in the Smokey and the Bandit movies. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but in the Me Too era, and just the women's empowerment era, that's what it should be called. We should move beyond the Me Too. Les Moonvee's just lost his job. But it just should be known as the women's empowerment movement right now. Badass women are back in style, as I like to say. Not that they ever went out of style. You know what I'm saying? But I was thinking about this the other day. Jackie Gleason first got famous from the show Honeymooners. And on the show Honeymooners, his catchphrase was, he would say to his wife, "One of these days, Alice, pow, straight to the moon." He was threatening to punch his wife in the face. That was his catchphrase on the most popular sitcom from the 1950s. So then in the 70s, he did the Smokey and the Bandit movies with Burt Reynolds. And he's the sheriff, and he's chasing Burt Reynolds. And his partner was his son, Jackie Gleason. And the son was really stupid. And his catchphrase in the Smokey and the Bandit movies was, "Junior, when I get home, I'm going to punch your mama in the mouth." So Jackie Gleason, if it's never been pointed out before, built his career out of threatening to punch women. More specifically, the wife of his characters that he was playing. So that would have been very uncool. Yeah, I had an incident that happened to me when I was in San Francisco at the Punchline a few months ago. I did the open mic night. And there's a line that I've been opening with in San Francisco whenever I'm there, and I did it. And the joke was that I love San Francisco, and I've always considered it the Jerusalem of stand-up comedy because I think stand-up comedy, the art form of stand-up comedy, was invented in San Francisco on, I think it's October 4th, 1866, when Mark Twain gave a lecture on the Sandwich Islands. And it was a funny lecture, and he had jokes, and then he started doing lectures and tours. And he was the first stand-up comedian in my mind. And Mark Twain said the coldest winter I ever spent was when an Asian tranny blew me with his finger up my ass. It's often misquoted. And of course, back then you could use a term like tranny. It was more of an uncouth time. It wasn't the socially advanced world that we live in now. So, you know, on Facebook, speaking of breaking, God, there's so many reasons to get off social media. I never look at, there's like, you can get your messages, and then there's some like top secret message area where like people who aren't your friends send you messages. So Ashna was helping me clean up, my computer was too heavy. And she's helping me clean shit up when I got back from China, and it was slow loading and whatever. And then we're looking around on the different social media things to see what else needed to be tweaked or fixed. And she goes, "You never look at these messages. Let's take a look." And we looked, and some female comedian had written me an email, and so I got this email like 3 weeks, maybe a month after this happened. And she was saying, "I just want you to be aware of, there was a transgender local comedian in the back who you had dehumanized with your joke you did about Mark Twain. And I just wanted you to know that she had to leave the room. She walked out of the club when you and I had a killer set, and I closed the open mic night, which open mic night you got like 20 comedians, so and then the audience is already, but it's that San Francisco Punchline again is one of my my home club, and I wrote the woman. I said, "Well, can you give me her name so I can send her a friend request and write to her about this? Obviously, she must have missed the part where I said, of course, back then you could use terms like that. It was a more uncouth time, and we're now more socially advanced now. and we no longer use those terms. Was the way that I and being specifically conscious of where I'm at in San Francisco. I mean, never anywhere do I go on like some fucking brazen brute white guy. I always think, my identity within my family is bleeding heart liberal guy, and so I think it's interesting when like liberals turning on each other. And that's the one thing I like about Bill Maher when he bitch slaps overly sensitive liberals. And I'm not saying I want to bitch slap this transgender person. All I'm saying is it was an interesting exchange I had with this female comedian, a local open micer, who felt the need to tell me that I had dehumanized another person. And I said, obviously, she must have missed the point where I said it's no longer acceptable to use terms like this. And then the woman writes me back. I wrote her a long, thoughtful message, and it was even longer. At one point, I thought, why am I explaining all of this? And Ashna read it, and she goes, yeah, cut out these 5 inches. Because it was this big, why am I going into this big... Because I care about other human beings. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, much less dehumanize someone. I mean, what a fucking powerful accusation to think that one of my jokes could have dehumanized anybody. So she writes me back, and I did write a very thoughtful thing saying, I made the point of saying... it wasn't cool to use that term anymore, and I even mentioned, the controversy with everyone getting a minor controversy, everybody getting upset with Chappelle over using that word. So she writes me back and she says, "Thank you so much for saying you're sorry and apologizing. I let her know, such and such, the transgender person who had been offended." And she says it's okay, you don't need to write her now. And everything's okay because you apologized. And it's funny because in my long and thoughtful message, I did not apologize. I don't think a comedian should ever apologize. I mean, well, if you're Louis C.K. and you're pulling your dick out and jacking off in front of people, yeah, you should apologize. But not for jokes. Well, fuck, I guess if you're Roseanne and you dehumanize... an African-American by calling them an ape, yeah, okay. Okay, I'm wrong. There are times when a comedian needs to apologize. But I don't think that, especially if you're at the open mic night level, you should be, I don't see you getting much traction getting the rest of the world or any place outside of San Francisco to cater to your overly sensitive needs. There's much more harsh shit being said, and there's much more hateful opinions coming out of people other than Tom Rhodes paying homage to the birth of stand-up comedy in San Francisco and being overly aware of the sensitivity towards transgender people. So anyway, I wrote the woman back and I said, I'd really like to. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough about this, but I thought it was funny that she didn't get me in touch with the offended transgender person, and then when I wrote her back, she wrote me back a second time and said, "No, your apology is all that I needed. I told her you said you were sorry to her," and it was funny. It was like, there's so many fucking other things to be upset about in the world right now than self-professed liberals turning on each other in the liberal enclave capital of San Francisco. Anyway, ramble. Well, good thing I waited 2 weeks to put out a podcast. I never want to dehumanize anybody, and I don't do anything hateful. Tranny is a fun-sounding word. Let me try that joke. Mark Twain said, the coldest winter I ever spent was when a trans person... I'm sorry. Mark Twain said, the coldest winter I ever spent was when an Asian trans person blew me with his finger up my ass. Yeah, it kind of takes away the melodic rhythm of the thing. So maybe that joke has seen its... I love getting rid of my act and writing a new act. I had some people come to me this week and say, man, I haven't seen you in a few years and everything's new. Boy, that makes me fucking happy. The answer to everything is to write better jokes. I told the girl to please tell the trans person I hope to work with her one day. And if you're an open micer and you are a trans person and you are so offended that you would storm out of an open mic over one word, I think, well, my asshole bully brother John used to always say to me when he would inflict pain on me or whenever I would be overly sensitive about something, he would say, "Suck it up, pussy." So that's probably a little harsh, but, and I'm not saying suck it up. I'm saying suck it up, transgender person. Just come on. The world is a tough, fucked up place, and there's a lot more than a slip of a word by a fellow liberal, open-minded person to be upset about. Like our country being sold out to the Russians, the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh about to be sworn in. Did you see Kamala Harris's? I love Kamala Harris. She put, it's a great video clip. I forget where probably on The Guardian. She pressed him for 8 minutes straight about, at the confirmation hearing, did you meet with such and such law firm, anyone from this law firm, and talk about the Mueller Russia investigation? And the way he squirmed out of it, I don't know everyone who works there. You could tell he is fucking lying, and she wouldn't let him off the spot. And he's obviously gonna help pardon Trump when he gets the fucking job. So I mean, like there's a lot to be upset about. Transgender people. And Jesus Christ, Serena Williams, that line judge taking away her game at the U.S. Open, it was a little too small town whitey sheriff, if you ask me. I mean, I've read all about it. Apparently, in case you don't know, at the U.S. Open, Serena Williams had some words for the judge, and he took a game away from her, and she ended up losing the championship final at the U.S. Open. But the progression of events, like he had penalized her, gave a warning for the coach, sending a signal, blah-de-de-blah, all that bullshit. It was too... first of all, in a championship thing, as a referee, you back off and let the players play. You could give a warning or some kind of harsh penalty, but you don't take away a fucking game in the championship final. And it was a little too small town whitey sheriff. Hey, I have this power over black people. It reminded me of the white woman in the park in Oakland on the phone saying, these black people are, or she didn't say black people, but she said, they're using a different coal that's illegal for their barbecue. there's so much stupid shit. Man, I'd like to take a break from the internet completely. It's been a few weeks, but I did that Bill Burr podcast, and Bill Burr was really, he's into helicopters, and my dad flew helicopters in Vietnam. And so we were talking about that, and then the Jane Fonda thing came up, where I said, yeah, Jane Fonda, veterans still hate her because she went to Hanoi at the height of the war, and she, basically, took pictures with the enemy, and it was after John McCain died. We were talking about this, and I said that, supposedly one of the prisoners slipped her a note, and she gave it to the Vietnamese people, and then they tortured the guys more, which was something I was wrong about. So all these people on Twitter and the internet were writing, Scopes.com says this story isn't true, and that's great to know that it wasn't true. But what is true was that Jane Fonda went to the capital of the people we were having a war with at the height of the war, and Vietnam veterans hate her guts to this day. And Vietnam veterans, if you go to VFW, VFWs all over America, they still have urinal webs or whatever, these little meshes that you put in a urinal with her face on it for a target. I was just like stating fact, and all these people were like, and I don't have any problem with Jane Fonda, and I've been to Hanoi 3 times myself, and Hanoi is a place that I'll never get enough of. In the enough big question I posed at the beginning of the podcast is, there's some things that I think you can get your full of, and there's some things that you'll never get your fill of. Like, I have a bottomless pit for my love of stand-up comedy, and for respect of anyone who does comedy at an open mic level, all the way to Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle, and the people that I consider the best. Doug Stanhope, Dave Attell, Brian Regan. The list goes on and on. I'll never get tired of going to Hanoi, Chicago Zanies, San Francisco Punchline. But there's some things in my life that I'm going to have to make a change on. And Bert Haas, who books Zanies, I was telling him about, this my strain in the relationship with Ashna, that, a big part of being in a relationship, and the number one part of being in a relationship, is being present. You actually have to be home and present with the person. You can't be gone continuously. And Bert's advice to me was I should cancel some gigs. He said, I got to give you the Dutch uncle advice. I said, what's the Dutch uncle? He goes, to give you like hard truth. And I go, oh, that's funny, because Dutch people are famous for their brutal honesty. So, anyway, I'm going to finish my Around the World album, and then who knows what? Hopefully, my wife will still love me. Jesus, if I could just get to the fucking level where I could just do weekends like the big name comedians, and not have to spend an entire fucking week somewhere. That sure would be a treat. Anyway, I hope this podcast hasn't been a bummer. I think it's really cool that James Hatfield from Metallica came to see me. What else did I want to talk to you about? I've been, there's this great Pearl Jam DVD live concert. It's actually they have it on the movies on Delta Airlines, but I bought the DVD, and it's called Let's Play 2. And it's Pearl Jam live at Wrigley Field. And Wrigley Field is a place that I'll never get enough of. And I remember going there when John Fox first took me to Chicago. I think it was 1987. And he was such a big star in Chicago then. He took me up into the booth when Harry Carey sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I met Steve Stone. Steve Stone had pitched for the Baltimore Orioles and was a hero of mine, and he was Harry Carey's booth announcer partner, still the voice of the Cubs, I think. And then Steve Stone came to Zany's, and then we went out with him. And I got to party with, sniff, sniff, I got to party with Steve Stone in 1987. And I, just 3 years before that, was in art class at Oviedo High School drawing pictures of this guy. And here I am years later. So I've gone to see the Cubs through the years, before they even had lights on the field. And I'm excited about it. So I actually walked all the way to Wrigley Field yesterday, and I walked around it just to feel the atmosphere. I did it, 2 years ago in October when they were leading up to win the World Series. So in the Pearl Jam movie DVD, Let's Play 2, they do this little warm-up concert on the roof of this bar called Murphy's. So the game's going on, so the bar's empty. And it was a little chilly last night, so I had my suit jacket on, and my little red pocket square sticking out, and the big pudgy sports bar doorman guy, as I walk in, said, and the only reason I'm going to this bar and wanted to find it was because Eddie Vedder loves it, and he had gone there through the years. So I thought, I'll pop in there and get a Polish hot dog. And the pudgy doorman goes, "Nice suit, buddy." Like I was overly dressed or out of place. And, if I'm going to point out to a transgender person, open mic or not, to be upset over a word, I should take that same advice to myself, not to be upset over a callous, portly sports bar doorman making a pointed comment directly at me over the fact that I was wearing a suit. I just smiled nonchalantly and said, "Thanks, pal." Kind of like a mwah, like a kiss, like a friendly fuck you, mwah. Eddie Vedder never mentioned that the doorman might be a douche, but I don't think the guy was a douche. He's just, the ball-busting humor of Chicago people. There's nothing wrong with that. There's certain types of people. We can't kill humor. We can't kill smart-ass, brazen comments by people. Everybody needs to have a little tougher skin in the world, and especially right now, because all kinds of things are fucked up. Oh, as I was walking up Clark Street, the Wiener Circle, this place that sells hot dogs and Polish sausages, it's been there forever, like old school hot dog sausage joint on Clark Street. There, on the sign, on the letters they put, it said, "Putin obvi got PP tape." So this purveyor of hot dogs and I agreed that Vladimir Putin obviously has got a videotape of Donald Trump and prostitutes in Moscow urinating all over this bed because the Obamas had slept on it. So if the hot dog person has it on their sign, it must be pretty common knowledge. So what was my point about the portly guy? Anyway, it didn't bother me, and they got a nice Polish sausage. I walked around. It's a great video if you haven't seen it. The Let's Play 2, and it's awesome. Wrigley Field is amazing. I'm very happy that I'm going to go there tonight. And I don't know. I guess it is kind of like the Great Wall of China slide for me. It's well, it's closer than China. I'm never going to get tired of going to this to Wrigley Field. Fuck, there was some big point. What is it? Crunchy paper with the notes. Yep. Ariana Grande got her titty squeezed at the Aretha Franklin funeral. God damn it, there was something about Wrigley Field. And oh, that was it. Thank you. Baba! My favorite thing about Wrigley Field, I would have kicked myself walking to Wrigley Field here shortly. My favorite thing about Wrigley Field, yeah, and this is where it ties in with the guy making the comment to me at the Murphy's Bleachers bar, but I wasn't bothered, and just you shouldn't get bothered about things, anybody, even if because there's tough motherfuckers in the world like my brother John who will inflict pain on you or physically attack you based on your political belief or just who you are and your identity and do much more than attack you. People get killed over this shit, and that's the world that we're living in. So the harsh rules of the jungle are in our supposed civil society now. So anywho, my favorite thing about Wrigley Field is that John Dillinger, the bank robber, when he was public enemy number one in the 1930s, and the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, invented the term public enemy number one for John Dillinger. He was the very first public enemy number one. So when he was public enemy number one, the most wanted man in America and the world, during that period, he often attended games at Wrigley Field because the Cubs were his favorite team, and he would sit in the audience. Everybody wore black suits back then and black hats. They didn't have facial recognition technology. He had kind of a, pretty distinct beat-up face. Like James Hatfield has a distinct face from. But I didn't recognize him at Zanies with 30 people in the audience. So I guess it's possible not to recognize John Dillinger at Wrigley Field. But every time I go to Wrigley Field, that thought crosses my head. I think about Eddie Vedder as a kid there. I think about John Fox first taking me to Wrigley Field, and, this is paradise. Isn't this paradise? Remember Larry Reeb, the Chicago comedy legend? He went to Hawaii on his honeymoon when he got married, and when he came back, I was talking to him, and he goes, Hawaii, that ain't paradise. Wrigley Field, that's paradise. So those are the things that go through my mind when I'm at Wrigley Field, and I always think about John Dillinger laughing under his breath, eating a hot dog, watching the Cubs play at Wrigley Field. So, seventh inning stretch is my favorite part of going to a baseball game. Tonight, I think I've been to Wrigley Field 30 times, and tonight I will be on the upper deck in the center, looking down. So think of me when I sing my favorite song. So I think I'm gonna have to sing my closing songs now. We'll do that Tom Rhodes song that the guy wrote, but take me out to the ball game, take me out to the crowd, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back, 'cause it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame, 'cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. As they say in Mongolia, hooray! Hooray for you wherever you are in the world. I hope you had the best summer of your life. As the seasons are changing now, let's all do better in the world. And I promise you, the next episode of my podcast will be more focused. Anyway, I'm glad to be back, and thanks again to everybody who sent the music. And this was one of the first songs ever sent to me. Enjoy. Shalom, amigos. Amigas.
Tom Rhodes, you're a funny man. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedian. Tom Rhodes, karate kick, baby, oh yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're a groovy dude. You go all around the world, telling jokes to all of the people. You are an international comedian. You're funny to everybody in every single country in the world. Tom Rhodes, I like you very much. I think you're talented and very wonderful. Tom Rhodes, you're the best guy in the world. I wanna be your friend, you should call me sometime. Here is my phone number, 603-644-0048. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedic sensation. Tom Rhodes, I like to listen to your podcast. Tom Rhodes, you're the best man to ever walk on the earth.